Let's start off with just a look at where we've come and this late surge in 2020 coming through for this cryptocurrency and others, we should add as well. Does it mean that, in a sense, Bitcoin has arrived? Because I think you're of the volition that that 2020 was a year of a regulatory evolution. I'm just reading what you've said. And 2021 will be the year of institutionalization.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That's very much the case. And obviously, you know, the recent rally has captured a lot of headlines given the pace of change. But in our view, this has been building for some time. And as you mentioned there, you know, 2020 was a year of significant progress on two of the key factors really required by institutions to allocate capital to the space. And that was first and foremost regulation, and we ourselves were the benefit of SFC licensing in Hong Kong, specifically for what they deem as virtual assets. And secondly, secure custody and safekeeping. And now that those two problems are solved, this rally is very much being led by the institutional capital allocation to the space, which is very different to what we saw in late 2017.
And Wayne, that brings me to another point. Okay, sure, but that the next step will be for it to become a form of payment, a mainstream payment method. But surely it can't be that if we're going to have these wild oscillations in its value.
Yeah, good question. Obviously, Bitcoin itself has gathered a lot of attention and is clearly, you know, getting the attention of those looking for a store of value and an alternative to central bank fiat currencies, which are obviously experiencing a lot of printing from central banks and so on. As far as its utility as a payment method goes, look, the integration into the likes of PayPal's platform, I guess, is a step in the right direction there. There's also a whole heap of additional scalability improvements being worked on for the technology itself. But what I think is also interesting is that initiatives like China's CBDC initiative or the DCEP initiative is another step towards digital payment becoming mainstream more broadly. And the more of those types of initiatives we have, the more people become used to dealing with digital payments, which is good for the broader digital asset ecosystem.
Wayne, speaking of the severe volatility in Bitcoin, how do you assess, how do you analyze Bitcoin's fundamentals?
Sure, good question. Look, on the volatility, we definitely expect over time volatility to subside, given the regulatory progress that has been made and the increased surveillance of the participants in the market that will be required. In addition, as more and more institutional activity continues to come to the space, I think we'll see less of those wild swings that you know, many have become used to over the last few years. So I think they're really key things to bear in mind with respect to its volatility profile going forward.
You talked about how 2021 will be a year for Bitcoin to get institutionalized. How about 2021 being the year when Robinhood investors get into the act? I mean, do you see that happening this year?
That's a good question. Whilst this rally has definitely been much more institutionally led, we are seeing signs of retail interest and activity starting to follow on now. You know, if you Google, if you look at the number of times Bitcoin is being Googled, again, it's those levels are 5 times what they were just a few months ago. So the rally is definitely garnering the attention of not only institutions but the more retail end of the market as well.
What is the biggest hurdle that you foresee for your views to be kind of derailed?
Look, I think a couple of years ago it was a lot less clear and a lot less certain when we didn't have the regulatory clarity that we have today. That was definitely a key piece of the puzzle. That's now been largely solved, and certainly in Asia, we've seen the regulators being quite forward-thinking, but also having a very clear agenda to protect investors with the frameworks that they put out. So that's been solved. As I said before, the other big hurdle was custody, secure, insured, and safe custody of assets. That too has been solved. So I think probably the last remaining piece is, I guess, regulators globally collaborating cross-border. And that is starting to happen now. We have industry bodies who are working on collaborating across borders, but that's probably the one thing that we'll see play out a bit more in 2021.